Welcome to Story Loft, where tales of warmth, wonder, and heartfelt emotions await you. Today, we are celebrating the magic of the holiday season, a time of hope, love, and connection. In this special holiday collection, you'll find stories that remind us of the beauty of kindness, the warmth of community, and the light that shines within all of us. Whether it's the joy of unexpected friendships or the courage to find happiness again, these stories will touch your heart and fill you with the true spirit of the season. If you enjoy our stories, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming content. And if you have a story of your own that you would like to share, we would love to receive it. Please send your story to storyloft@outlook.com. You can find the address in the description box below. So, settle in, grab a cozy blanket, and let the spirit of the holidays wrap around you like a warm hug. And let's begin. As the first snowfall dusted the ground, turning the neighborhood into a glistening wonderland, the little town of Maplewood seemed like it was pulled straight out of a postcard. Christmas lights adorned the trees, and garlands wrapped around porch railings with cheerful bows that fluttered in the chilly breeze. It was late December, and every house on Sycamore Street seemed to be dressed in holiday magic, as if the festive spirit was woven into the very fabric of the town. In the middle of the cozy lane stood the Daniels house, a modest home with a wreath made of pine cones and red berries hanging on its front door. Inside, the aroma of cinnamon and fresh pine needles filled the rooms, and laughter spilled out of the kitchen where Mary Daniels was baking cookies with her 2 children, Ellie and Sam. The children, 8 and 10, were covered in flour and sugar, their faces lit up with the kind of joy that only comes around this time of year. "Mom, can we decorate the gingerbread men now?" Sam asked, excitement coloring his voice as he licked a spot of icing from his finger. Mary smiled. "Of course, honey. Just remember to save some icing for the cookies." She gave them a playful wink, her heart swelling with the happiness that came from sharing these simple moments with her children. Life hadn't been easy lately for Mary. It had been just over a year since she had lost her husband, Paul, in an accident that turned their world upside down. The first Christmas without him had been unbearably quiet, and the absence of his laughter felt in every corner of their home. This year, Mary decided she needed to bring joy back to their lives, not just for her children, but also for herself and for the memory of Paul, who had always loved the holidays. And so, with determination, she put on the most cheerful smile she could muster and filled their December days with everything she could think of: caroling, decorating the tree, baking treats, and watching every holiday movie they could find. But there was something still missing, a void that no amount of gingerbread or twinkling lights seemed to fill. One morning, as she was taking out the trash, Mary noticed her neighbor, Mr. Thompson, struggling to shovel snow from his driveway. Mr. Thompson was in his 70s, a widower who kept to himself mostly. His white hair peeked out from under a knitted cap, and his movements were slow and cautious. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," Mary called, waving at him. He paused, leaning on his shovel to catch his breath. "Good morning, Mary. Seems like winter has really set in, doesn't it?" "It sure has," Mary replied. She watched as he resumed his efforts, his back bending low as he scooped another pile of snow. Something tugged at her heart. "Hey, Ellie, Sam," she called through the open door. "Grab your coats and come outside. I have an idea." In minutes, the children bundled up in scarves and mittens, and Mary had taken their own shovel out of the garage. Together, they walked over to Mr. Thompson's driveway. "Hey, Mr. Thompson, would you mind if we helped you out a bit?" Mary asked, her voice filled with warmth. He looked surprised, with his eyes darting back and forth between her and her children. "Oh, you really don't have to." "We want to," Ellie interrupted with a grin. "It's fun for us." Mr. Thompson smiled. "Well, if you insist." And so they worked together, Mary and the children shoveling with enthusiasm while Mr. Thompson stood by, marveling at their energy. The work that would have taken him hours was finished in just half an hour, and when they were done, Mr. Thompson invited them in for hot cocoa as a thank you. They sat in his living room, sipping the warm drink, while he shared stories about his childhood Christmases. From that day on, something changed in Mary. She realized that while she had been trying to bring joy to her own home, there were others around her who needed that light just as much. She decided that this holiday season they would focus not only on what they had lost, but what they could give. The very next day, she took Ellie and Sam to the store and bought supplies to make holiday cards. Together, they crafted handmade cards with glitter and colorful paper, each one carefully written with messages of love and cheer. Then, they delivered them to their neighbors, some of whom they barely knew, and left a small package of homemade cookies on each doorstep. It was a simple gesture, but the smile and gratitude they received in return made Mary's heart feel fuller than it had in a very, very long time. A week before Christmas, there was a knock at the door. Mary opened it to find Miss Klein, an elderly lady who lived a few houses down. She was holding a pie, and her eyes were shimmering with tears. "Mary, I wanted to thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "It's been so lonely since my husband passed, and your card, it meant the world to me. I haven't felt this kind of warmth in a long time." Mary felt her own eyes well up as she took the pie. "Oh, Miss Klein, I'm so glad. Please, why don't you come in for a while?" Miss Klein stepped inside, and soon they were sharing stories over slices of pie, while the laughter of the children came echoing from the living room. It wasn't long before other neighbors began dropping by too, each one touched by the simple act of kindness Mary and her children had shown. The loneliness that had once hung over their street seemed to dissolve as neighbors connected, sharing meals, stories, and laughter. On Christmas Eve, Mary organized a small gathering at her house. It was nothing fancy, just a potluck with whatever each family could bring. The living room was packed with people, some sitting on the floor, others on chairs, as they shared dishes from different family traditions. Mr. Thompson brought his famous apple cider. Miss Klein baked her special sugar cookies, and even the new family that had just moved in brought a dish from their home country of Mexico. There, in that room filled with warmth, laughter, and the scent of pine and spices, Mary realized what had been missing all along. It wasn't just about recreating the perfect Christmas for her children or trying to mask the pain of loss. It was about opening their hearts, about creating new connections, and finding joy not only in what they received, but in what they gave. As the evening wore on, they all gathered around the Christmas tree to sing carols. Mr. Thompson's deep baritone mixed with Ellie and Sam's high-pitched voices, and Miss Klein led them in her favorite carol, Silent Night. And for the first time in a long time, Mary felt a peace settling deep inside of her. After the carols, as the children played with the new friends they had made and the adults talked into the night, Mary looked around her living room. The tree twinkled in the corner, and above it hung a picture of Paul, his eyes crinkled in a smile that seemed to share in the joy of the moment. She knew he would be proud of what they had done, of how they had found their way out of the darkness by bringing light to others. And in that room, filled with the neighbors who had become friends, Mary realized something else. She wasn't alone anymore. They weren't just a family of 3, but part of a community, one built on kindness, compassion, and the simple joy of sharing what they had. That Christmas, Mary learned that the magic of the season wasn't about what was under the tree, but the love that surrounded it. It was about people coming together, lifting each other up, and finding hope in one another. And as she watched her children laugh, Their eyes shining with happiness, Mary knew that this was a Christmas they would all remember, not because of what they had lost, but because of what they had gained. The hustle and bustle of the holiday season was in full swing. The streets were crowded, and the twinkling lights above Main Street lit up the sky like 1,000 tiny stars. Children laughed, and families rushed from shop to shop, their arms filled with bags of gifts. But amidst the festivity, on a small bench next to the town's Christmas tree, sat a young girl with a worn-out jacket, her gaze downcast. Her name was Emily, and she was only 10. Her mother, Jenna, stood a few feet away, shifting her weight nervously as she clutched a cup of hot cocoa. They weren't there to shop or admire the decorations. In fact, this year there wasn't much to celebrate. Jenna had lost her job just a month earlier, and they had been evicted from their small apartment. Now she and Emily were staying in a shelter, trying to make the best of what felt like a hopeless situation. Jenna turned to Emily and forced a smile. "How about we take a walk by the tree, sweetheart?" Emily nodded silently, her eyes following a family walking hand in hand, their laughter echoing around her. She remembered how Christmas had been just a year ago. A warm home, a decorated tree, her father lifting her up to put the star on top. But then he had left, and life had become a series of goodbyes. First her father, then their home, and now it felt like goodbye to everything joyful. As they walked along the tree, Jenna spotted a small table set up nearby with the sign that read, "Letters to Santa." Children were eagerly scribbling on sheets of paper, their parents watching them with indulgent smiles. Jenna felt a pang of longing, but then an idea sparked in her mind. "Emily, would you like to write a letter to Santa?" she asked softly, hoping that maybe, just maybe, this small activity would bring a bit of cheer to her daughter's heart. Emily looked up at her mother, then at the bustling crowd. She shrugged. "I guess," she replied, her voice quiet. They approached the table, and Jenna handed her daughter a pen and a piece of paper. Emily sat down and stared at the blank page in front of her. Around her, children were asking Santa for dolls, games, or even new bicycles. She bit her lip and began to write, her handwriting small and neat. "Dear Santa, I don't need toys or presents this year. I just want my mom to be happy again. She works so hard and never stops smiling for me, even though I know she has sadness inside. If you could make this Christmas special for her, I would really be thankful. Love, Emily." When she finished, Emily folded the letter and placed it into the mailbox, marked North Pole. Jenna watched her daughter, her heart breaking and swelling at the same time. She wanted to be strong for Emily, but it was moments like this that reminded her how fragile everything had become. A few days later, the shelter organized a small holiday party for the families staying there. It wasn't much, just a few decorations, some cookies, and a small tree set up in the corner. Jenna tried to make the most of it, chatting with other parents, while Emily sat by herself nibbling on a gingerbread cookie. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and a man dressed in a bright red Santa suit walked in, a large sack slung over his shoulder. The children gasped, and laughter filled the room as Santa greeted everyone with a hearty, "Ho, ho, ho!" Emily looked up, her eyes widening. She hadn't expected to see Santa at the shelter, and something stirred inside of her. Something like excitement she hadn't felt in a long time. Santa began calling out names, handing out small wrapped presents to each child. The room was filled with joy as children tore open their gifts, their laughter echoing through the walls. Then Santa called out, "Emily, and she shyly walked up, taking the gift he had handed her. "Thank you," she whispered, and Santa gave her a warm wink. She returned to her spot, unwrapping the gift to find a soft knitted scarf in her favorite shade of blue. She wrapped it around her neck, and for the first time in a long time, a smile spread across her face. It was warm, comforting, kind of like a hug. But there was more. Santa wasn't finished yet. He reached into his sack and pulled out a bright red envelope, waving it in the air. "This one," he said, his eyes twinkling, "is for a very special mom. Jenna." Jenna's eyes widened in surprise. She walked up, her heart pounding as she took the envelope. She looked at Santa, and he gave her a nod, a silent reassurance that everything was going to be all right. Jenna returned to her seat, her hands trembling as she opened the envelope. Inside was a card, and tucked within it were several gift cards to a grocery store, a clothing shop, and even one for a local toy store. Tears filled her eyes as she read the note inside. "Dear Jenna, someone who loves you very much has asked for you to have a special Christmas. We hope this helps make it a little brighter. Merry Christmas, from Santa." Jenna looked over at Emily, who was staring at her with wide, hopeful eyes. She reached over and pulled her daughter into her hug, her tears spilling over as she whispered, "You did this, didn't you?" Emily nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "I just wanted you to be happy, Mom." Jenna held her daughter close, her heart bursting with love and gratitude. She had tried so hard to stay strong, to keep smiling through the difficult times. But in this moment, she realized that it was okay to lean on others, to accept the kindness of strangers. It was okay to let herself feel joy again. After the party, as they walked back to their room at the shelter, Jenna looked down at her daughter, who was still wrapped in her new scarf. "You know what, Emily?" she said, her voice full of emotion. "I think this might be the best Christmas we've ever had." Emily looked up at her mother, her eyes sparkling in the soft glow of the holiday lights. "Really?" Jenna nodded, a genuine smile lighting up her face. "Yes. Because we have each other, and because there are people out there, people who don't even know us, who care about us. And that is the real magic of Christmas." As they walked together, hand in hand through the snow-covered streets of the little town, Jenna felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt hope. Hope that things would get better, that kindness they had received would carry them through the tough days ahead. She knew that there were still challenges to face, but for now, in this moment, the warmth of her daughter's hand in hers and the kindness of strangers' gifts was enough. And that, she realized, was the true gift of Christmas. Not the presents or the decorations, but the love and the kindness that reminded them that they were never alone. The little town of Pine Hollow lay nestled in a valley between the forest-covered hills, each home and shop adorned with twinkling lights and the decorations creating a scene out of a Christmas fairy tale. The streets were lined with wreaths, and the central square was filled with bustling holiday markets, laughter, and the ringing sound of children's giggles as they played in the snow. The entire town seemed to be celebrating, preparing for holidays with a sense of joy and unity that wrapped around each person like a warm blanket. All except for one home, sitting a bit further away from the others, a modest cottage with dark windows and no festive lights. Inside, Emma sat in the dim light of her living room, her fingers wrapped around the mug of lukewarm tea. It was her first Christmas alone, since her husband Ben had passed away earlier in the year. The loss had left her heart hollow, And despite the beauty of the season all around her, she could not summon even a flicker of joy she had once felt during the holidays. The house felt empty, the silence echoing too loud in the space where laughter and love had once been. Emma sighed and set her tea aside. She didn't want to feel this way. She knew Ben wouldn't have wanted her to spend the holidays wrapped in silence, but she couldn't help it. Every ornament, every carol, every twinkling light reminded her of what she had lost, of the love that had filled their small home. A knock on the door startled her from her thoughts. Emma hesitated for a moment, then slowly stood up, making her way to the front door. She wasn't expecting anyone, and the prospect of company felt overwhelming. When she opened the door, she found a young girl standing there, bundled up in a bright pink coat, her cheeks red from the cold. "Hi," the girl said, her voice bright and cheerful. "I'm Sophie, and I live just down the street. My mom made some cookies, and I thought you might like some." She held up a small, festively wrapped package. Emma blinked, taken aback by the unexpected visitor. She looked at the girl, her brown eyes wide and hopeful. Emma forced a smile, her voice a little hoarse, and said, "Thank you, Sophie. That's very kind of you." Sophie beamed and handed her the package. "You're welcome. It looked kind of dark in here, so I thought maybe you could use some cookies. Everyone likes cookies, right?" Emma felt her heart soften at the child's honesty. She managed a small smile. "I suppose they do." Sophie glanced behind Emma, her eyes catching the sight of the undecorated living room. "Are you going to put up a Christmas tree?" she asked, her voice curious but gentle. Emma hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I haven't decided yet." Sophie nodded, her expression serious for someone so young. "Well, if you do, we're having a decorating party tomorrow at my house. My mom said I could invite anyone I wanted. You should come. It'll be fun." She smiled, her eyes sparkling, before she turned and bounded off the porch, calling over her shoulder, "Merry Christmas, Miss Emma." Emma stood there for a moment, watching Sophie run down the street before she closed the door, her heart feeling a little lighter than it had in the days previous. She unwrapped the package to find a dozen sugar cookies decorated with colorful icing and sprinkles. She took a bite, the sweetness spreading across her tongue, and found herself smiling. Something inside her began to thaw. The next morning, Emma decided to take a walk through the town. She wrapped herself in a thick coat, slipped on her gloves, and headed out into the cold. The crisp air filled her lungs as she made her way along the cobbled streets, the snow crunching under her boots. Everywhere she looked, there was laughter and holiday cheer. Families decorating their homes, friends sharing hot drinks from the market stands, children pulling sleds across the snow. As she passed by Sophie's house, she heard music and laughter coming from inside. She paused, looking at the warm glow spilling out from the window, and felt a pang of longing. She had loved hosting Christmas parties with Ben, welcoming friends and neighbors into their home, filling it with joy and warmth. She had almost forgotten what that felt like. Emma was about to turn away when the door opened and Sophie stepped out, her eyes lighting up when she saw Emma. "Miss Emma, you came!" she shouted, waving excitedly. Before Emma could even reply, Sophie ran over to her, grabbing her hand. "Come on, come in. Mom made hot cocoa, and we have so many decorations." Emma hesitated, her heart pounding. She wasn't sure she was ready for a gathering. She wasn't sure she could face the laughter and joy without feeling the emptiness that always seemed to follow her now. But Sophie's hand was warm in hers, and the hope in the girl's eyes was impossible to resist. "All right," Emma said, softly, letting herself be led inside. The house was filled with people, neighbors and friends, their laughter echoing through the rooms. The scent of pine and cinnamon wafted in the air, and a large Christmas tree stood in the center of the living room, half decorated with twinkling lights and bright ornaments. Sophie's mother, a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile, welcomed Emma in, offering her a mug of hot cocoa. Emma took the mug, feeling the warmth seep into her fingers, and found herself relaxing. She watched as people worked together to decorate the tree, hanging ornaments, placing garlands, and adding finishing touches. Sophie handed her a delicate glass ornament. "Will you help me put it up?" she asked. Emma nodded, taking the ornament and carefully hanging it on a branch. The rest of the day passed in a blur of laughter and warmth, and when it was time for Emma to leave, Sophie ran up to her, giving her a tight hug. "Thank you for coming, Miss Emma. I hope you come again soon." Emma hugged her back, her throat tight with emotion. "Thank you, Sophie. You made my day very special." As Emma walked home, she felt something shift inside of her. The darkness that had filled her home no longer seemed as heavy. She knew the pain of losing Ben was always going to be there, but she also knew that maybe she could let in a little bit of light again. That night, she went up to the attic and pulled down an old box of Christmas decorations she hadn't touched since Ben had passed. She opened it, her eyes misting over as she saw the ornaments that they had collected together over the years, each one holding a memory of their time together. She took a deep breath, then carefully took out the small string of lights and began to decorate the window in her living room. It wasn't much, just a simple strand of lights, but as they flickered to life, casting a soft glow across the room, Emma felt a warmth spread through her heart. She stood back, looking at the lights, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt at peace. The next morning, she woke up to the sound of a knock at the door again. She opened it to find Sophie standing there. "Miss Emma, we saw your lights last night. They are so pretty," Sophie said, practically bouncing on her toes. "I wanted to ask if you wanted to come help us build a snowman today. We are making the biggest one ever." Emma smiled, her heart feeling lighter than it had in a long time. "I would love to," she said, putting on her coat. Together they walked down the street, the air filled with the sound of laughter and holiday cheer. As they built the snowman, Emma found herself laughing along, the weight she had been carrying for so long finally lifting. And as she looked around at the smiling faces of her neighbors, at Sophie's joyful laughter, she realized that maybe she wasn't as alone as she had thought. The light in the window was small, but it was enough to guide her back to the warmth she had been missing. And that, she knew, was the true spirit of Christmas. Not just the decorations or the gifts, but the love, the kindness, and the light we share with one another, even in the darkest of times. Thank you for joining us in this heartwarming holiday collection here at Story Loft. We hope these stories have filled your heart with joy and reminded you of the magic that exists within kindness, community, and love. If you enjoyed today's stories, please give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us share more uplifting tales that connect us all. And remember, if you have a story of your own that you would like to share, we would love to hear from you. Please send your story to storyloft@outlook.com. You can find the address in the description box below. From all of us at Story Loft, we wish you a holiday season filled with warmth, love, and countless beautiful moments. Until next time, keep the spirit of the stories alive.